everybody. Thanks for joining us on your midday break. This is one of the very last events we're doing for the In the Company of Women book tour, and I have to say these conversations have been some of the most meaningful I've had in the last 12 years of running my business. And I've run a blog called Design Sponge for the past 12 years, which has slowly over the past decade kind of evolved from a site where we talk about beautiful things to talking about the people behind those things and the struggles they face in life and work. And the new book, In the Company of Women, is all about highlighting women's stories, their struggles, how they've pushed through difficult times. All of these incredible women are a part of the book, and today we're going to be talking about some of their stories and their experiences. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Let's go down this way.
I'm Claire Mazur. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Of a Kind, and we sell the pieces and tell the stories of emerging makers in the United States. And recently we've also expanded to include just discoveries across lifestyle categories, everything from our favorite restaurants to apps to books. And we do that in our podcast, in our newsletter, and on the website.
I'm Erica Cerulo, the other co-founder of a Kind, and Claire did such a great job, I have nothing else to say.
Sorry.
Erica, would you like to introduce me?
I know.
I'm Karen Young. I am the founder of a company called We Shave. It's a women's shave brand and subscription club for, obviously for women.
So we're going to start with one of my favorite questions from the book, which has to do with looking way, way, way back in time. So I would love to know from each of you what you wanted to be when you were little and how that connects to what you do now in any way. Karen, let's start with you.
So when I was younger, I had this fantasy of being a lawyer, and I apologize now. But no, I had this fantasy of being a lawyer. I tend to be very analytical, and I love to sort of process and really sort of pick things apart. So when I was young, obviously it was the fantasy of like, yeah, I'm gonna be in like this great high-rise building, and it's gonna overlook the Brooklyn waterfront. And eventually I was like, actually, I think somewhere hidden in there is design, because it was like everything that I fantasized about was this concept of what a lawyer, would look like and what my life would look like and so on. And later on, I actually went to school for psychology, and I realized that I really just loved pulling things apart and like really analyzing things and so on. And I think the way that I turned it into what I do now, I realized that I had a real love for product design, and I also had a love for sort of understanding how people use things, how to make people happy, how like a daily experience can sort of be changed into something that actually, leaves a mark on someone. So anytime I touched product or looked at product, I always kind of thought about all of those little things. And now what I do, a good portion of what I do, I hear from women a lot who are like, email and say, this product has really changed my life, or, the scent is so amazing. And so somehow I think I like to say I took the scenic route to where I am now, but somehow I think I managed to pull all those things together into a really fantastic career.
Mm-hmm. Claire and Erica, what about you two?
When I was growing up, I don't think I knew what I wanted to be, or at least was unwilling to commit to an idea of what I wanted to be. And when I was in college, I did this amazing program called Road Trip Nation that involved driving across the country in an RV with two friends and interviewing people who had taken interesting career paths. And one of the people that we interviewed was Atuza Rubinstein, who was then the editor-in-chief of 17 magazine. And I had booked that interview, and it was someone I was really excited about. And we were asking the people we interviewed all sorts of career questions, and I said that I didn't know what I wanted to be, and she was like, you do, though. And I was like, it's going to be one of these things, like whatever. I'm just like not going to get out of this what I want to get out of this. And I was like, well, I love magazines, but I just like don't know if that's the thing for me. And she's like, okay, so tell me about this. And we started talking about the magazines that I had read when I was growing up, and I was like, well, like all the teen magazines, but also Disney Adventures and Consumer Reports for Kids. And she's like, that's not normal. Like, that's not normal. If you read those magazines, that means you really like magazines. You should do this. And so I did, and I worked in magazines for 5 years before we started Of a Kind. And then I think it became clear to me that that world wasn't what I wanted it to be anymore, but the idea of creating content and engaging people with storytelling and voice, and tying it all together with these products that we sell was what was meaningful to me.
I think I was also unwilling to commit to my many interests. And when you asked this question for the book, I had this like moment of clarity where I remembered for a really long time saying, when people would ask me what I wanted to be when I was like really young, I would be like, well, I'm going to be an ice skater and a singer and a dancer. And mostly because it was like, well, I want to be a pop star, but I really like ice skating lessons too. And I distinctly remember like my parents never once being like, it's going to be hard to do all three, like pick a lane. And I look back and I'm like, that definitely, I remember their reaction to that and being like, well, if they didn't say I couldn't, I can definitely do this. Like, it's realistic. Because I kind of, you expect someone to shoot you down when you say that. And I actually think that sort of like style of parenting and just being like, sure, you can totally do that, is kind of what led me to this place now where we're, always coming up with this big ideas and being like, why not? Let's do it. Let's try this and let's start a business, all of which seem kind of unrealistic when they're just an idea. And so I will credit my parents with sort of being like, sure, yeah, you can do that. Because what's the point of saying like you can't?
Yeah, I'm so happy you mentioned wanting to be an ice dance singer.
Yeah.
One of the most frequent answers given for that question in this book was something that had to do with performance, whether it was a dancer or a singer or an actress. And I found it so interesting because not only did most people not end up doing those things, but I found that people who run their own businesses of any type, you have to perform. That is a huge part of what your daily job will be, is being the face of your business. And so I thought it was fascinating that all of these careers found a way back into that aspect of performance. But you all brought up something that makes me think about the idea of mentorship and visibility. And visibility was a huge inspiration for this book. And I thought a lot about how women not having role models or very visible examples of people in their field or in fields they maybe don't even know about yet, how that can affect their desire to be in that field or even their knowledge of it at all. Did any of you have mentors in your current field that you looked up to, or anybody maybe in a different field that inspired you to maybe dream a little bigger or try your own project?
We were really inspired by 20 by 200, which is a company started by Jen Beckman that is a similar model to ours with prints. And I remember one of the things that she did is she had a Tumblr for 20 by 200, but she also had a Tumblr that was like Jen at 20 by 200. And she would talk a lot about the goings on behind the business. And I read it obsessively. And I remember when they raised venture capital, and I remember, and like how she talked about that and thinking like, what does this mean for that business? And really following that closely. And I think that certainly gave me a sense that like this can be done and this is kind of how it's done and one person can do this and make an idea into a reality that way.
So I think that for me, what I did is I kind of started by like reading magazines and books and blogs and so on, and then I'm a little bit on the shyer side normally. I'm very much an introvert. So what I started doing is, I started forming a little bit of a community within the blogging world especially, and I would just kind of reach out and go to like events and so on, and people that I admired, people who, many of them actually are in the book. I ended up just kind of getting to know them on less of a mentorship level at first and more of a, I'm really curious about you and curious about what you do. And from there, they became mentors to me and some even friends. Yeah.
I love that you brought up community because that was probably the only thread connecting all of these women in the book was the importance of community and how the lack of it sometimes even stymied the creation of a business because there wasn't that sort of strong base and support system to keep encouraging you through those tough times. And I'd love to talk a little bit about the way community affects each of your business lives because for me, I know if I didn't have other women to talk to who ran businesses of any kind, I don't know if I would have gotten done what I've gotten done so far because I think those were the people who reminded me that everyone's going to face hurdles. Everyone's going to have tough times. You're going to have moments where your business gets set back a little bit, but you'll be able to push forward. Who are those people for you, and how did you find and build the community you have?
I think it took us a little while to find those people for sure. And I think in the beginning, we definitely felt like we didn't know that many other women who were running their own businesses. And building up a group of designers that we were working with definitely helped with that. And I think the ones that we are that we have this like the closest relationship in this way are Lizzie and Catherine Fortunato, the sisters behind the line, Lizzie Fortunato, and we'll have these like 4-hour-long dinners where everybody's like sort of shouting over each other, and we talk about everything from hiring and firing to like managing resources to design and aesthetic things to like who makes your shoes.
Karen, what about you?
Well, first, I'm inviting myself.
You're invited.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So it kind of just, jumps off from my last answer, which is where, I really did just start creating this an honest community around me. And what you said just now was really important. Just, people who were actually talking about the struggles of running a business. I needed to have that truth because what I notice with business is that there's a lot of gloss and glitter over it, My boyfriend somewhere, hanging out over there somewhere, he likes to call it, he said, Karen, you really like to read a lot of design porn, like a lot of business porn,
Yeah.
And I'm just like, ugh. I'm reading like those entrepreneur magazine articles and Inc.com articles, and they're like, this company made $500 million in the first 2 months of business, and you're
Well,
like,
it's only the stats people want to share.
Yeah. And they're like, but you forgot to mention the part where they were like crying in the closet, But so it was really, really, really important to me to be surrounded by those women who were very, very honest about the struggles or even the good things about what it took to run and grow a business. And what I found was I approached those women even kind of thinking that they were going to be like, oh yeah, this happened for me overnight. And then they were like, girl, no, sit down, let's talk.
And I mean, we have been in the same position a lot where we have tried to be really honest, and it's always surprising to me how surprised people are. And, you don't brag about it publicly how shitty times are. Like we don't, and it's just not good for your business, right? To be like, oh, it's actually awful right now, and we're about to fall through. But I find that like in the moments where it's good and it's safe to sort of like speak in retrospect to the times that have been really hard, it's really therapeutic to talk about it yourself too, and just be like, right, because this is going to happen again, and like acknowledging that it changes and it gets better. It makes such a difference. And for us, a turning point was when we sold the business, and you have a sense of security, and I feel like that's when we really let loose to everybody who came and was like, congratulations, and we were like, you want to hear what it was like beforehand? Because like we were pretty sure that we were going to have to close the doors at many points over the last 5 years. I think it's really important to be honest about those things when you can be.
Yeah, more of that, please.
Yeah.
And I think we've also, there's the fact that we've been around for 6 years and have followed the sort of business cycles and seen the highs and lows and seen the company that everybody's like so excited about and, raving about and can't wait to pour their money into, then crash and burn a year later or whatever. Seeing enough of those things happen, you become a little bit like desensitized to those stories.
Usually if it seems too good to be true.
It is.
Yeah. No, that's been my general experience as well. I think too often people do make articles, books, anything, TV segments about businesses feel like a highlight reel. And it is this moment of this much venture capital money, this huge step, this success, boom, everyone has a fancy house and like 5 nannies and everything's great. And that's generally not the way things work out, but people are intimidated and scared to talk about these things publicly, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to make this book, was to create a safe space to have these conversations. And so one of the things I asked everybody in the book, as you all know, is to share a moment when something didn't work out, whether that was a mistake or a time you had to like take a step back or slow down, and what you learned from that. Because I think that mistakes and failures are all just very much opportunities that are disguised and chances to learn things, and they are more painful than when you learn things from great opportunities, but they're important to pay attention to. So I'd love to know from each of you an example of a time when something did not go well, but what you were able to pull out of that moment.
I mean, the one that comes to mind most immediately is a time when we pursued an expansion of the business that didn't feel like what Erica or I wanted to do, but it felt like the only way to grow the business aggressively and the only way to convince investors to give us money. And we even said to each other at the time, we turned at each other and we would be like, you also think it sounds miserable to build this thing, right? And be like, totally.
Well, like, we'll just hire people
yeah,
to run that part of the business. We won't have to touch it, right?
Yeah, like we totally gut checked and we were like, you also think this sounds miserable. Totally. Okay, let's go in this room and tell these people we're gonna do it and it's gonna make us like $1 billion. And we got enough money to start expanding the business in that way. It was like a marketplace model, and it didn't work out, and it almost killed the business. And we really thought, like, we had, these sort of like 11th hour things come through and save us from having to close the doors. But it was going to be the thing that was going to end Of a Kind. And I look back and I was like, let's never do anything again that's not the thing that we're really passionate or excited about. Let's not do it just because it's the thing that seems like the trajectory we're supposed to be on, because we're a startup and because we should be able to demonstrate hockey stick growth and how we're going to scale, and no one will give us money if we don't.
It's hockey stick growth.
So it's like you start growing slowly, and then you get investment, and then it shoots right up to the sky. Yeah.
Because
that's what all your graphs are supposed to look like. That's what all your projections
that
are
is
supposed
not
to
what
look
my graphs
like.
yeah, certainly wasn't
There are a lot
ours
of
either.
flat hockey sticks.
But that's like what all the venture capitalists want to see
Yeah.
when you put up projections. They'll put $2 million in, and then it'll go like that.
Yeah.
That's realistic.
And that, yeah, exactly. Very realistic. And we did it, and, we pursued this thing that didn't sound fun to us. It just sounded like the thing that, was what we should be doing in order to grow a lot. And it ultimately was just as much of a nightmare as we thought, and we weren't good at it. And I think, like, Eric and I know ourselves also well enough to know that, like, if we're not excited about it, if we're not invested in it, we're not going to do a good job at it.
Mm-hmm. Karen, what about you?
So you guys are describing exactly where I am right now, which is so creepy.
It can stop you from doing that. Don't build a marketplace. Don't.
So WeShave is actually my second business. My first business was in the textile design space, and I really just went out there, and this is the type of person that I am anyway. Like, if you give me a piece of furniture from IKEA and you put the sort of instructions next to it, I'm gonna chuck the instructions and be like, end up with like an upside down table or something. Because I just love sort of figuring it out. And that's what I did with my first business. I figured it out, but I had no idea how to ask for help. I didn't know who to turn to ask for help. And I basically was like, okay, I see this business, which is like 10 times bigger than me, doing exactly these things, so I'm gonna model that. Meanwhile, they're here and I'm here. And I tried to model exactly what they were doing. They had staff and money and everything, like all the stuff that I didn't have. And I basically tried to build a business like that, like all by my onesie, and completely floundered. And so I actually had to take some time off. I took time off and I paused and I went back for a full-time job. And I learned and I ate, what did they call it? Is it crow pie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like pie.
My South American inflections are coming out. Yeah, and so that for me was a really, really, really humbling moment. And so I'm back now building my second business, and it's falling in line of the startup. So now I've got a little bit of that gloss on me, and some venture capital like kind of knocking, and I'm like, okay, like how do I do this now better than I did the first time around? And the difference between now and then is that I know that I'm emailing you girls, for one thing. We're gonna have dinner. And I have help. I finally accepted that I need help. I need tools. In the book, part of when I was talking a little bit about being in that position of sort of floundering with the company, I described it as if someone had sort of like built a glass mountain and they had told everyone else how to climb it and like given them, all the fancy shoes and clips and everything. And here I was like trying to like build the stuff and climb the mountain at the same time. So yeah, the difference now is having people around me and reaching out for help when I need it.
It makes a big difference to have help, and it makes a big difference to have people who can help remind you to listen to your gut. I think almost every problem that I discussed interviewing people for this book really involved somebody ignoring their gut for a second and saying, but this is what I think I should be doing, and I think modeling yourself in another business. I did the same thing with my blog and I got a 3-year lease for a studio years ago because I thought, well, every other blog has a fancy studio with like adorable girls lined up at pink desks, so I should have the exact same thing, and sign myself up for like a ridiculous amount of money to spend. And that after 3 months, my employees were like, oh, I don't want to work here anymore. Can we just work from home? Like, that was much easier. It's cold outside. I don't want to walk here. But I had signed myself up for 3 years of rent, and that was an embarrassing mistake to make 10 years into running a business, where I thought, shouldn't I know better than to make decisions based on what I think something should be? But that's something that I think plagues women in particular a lot, is this sort of comparison game. How do you guys pull yourselves out of that when you feel those moments of like, ooh, but this company does this, so I should do that?
I mean, I think one thing that's helped me is seeing so many companies where I felt like, oh my God, if only like we had that level of success, and seeing them falter in some way, or in some cases even fail. And I just think it's years and years of that. I mean, I still don't always know I still don't always know to pull myself out of that, but I do think we're like almost 7 years into this, and there's just been so many, every single company that I've ever sat and idolized and been like, why aren't we more like them? I've now seen the cracks at one point or another, I think.
Yeah.
So that helps.
Yeah. Tariq very quickly is like, no. I think that it's just sort of built into this sense of success and failure, that we have. And this, as humanity, it's sort of part of, it's kind of like looking in a mirror, you know what I mean? Except you're the person who determines what that mirror is every day. Like, what is it that I want to model? What is it do I want to achieve, and so on. And so when you find your tribe, I think it's very natural to kind of go, hey, she's just like me, but yet she's got all this going on, like, what am I doing wrong? So it's just become really important for me to just gut check, like you said, and remember, well, even if they're here now, maybe they were in my position a few years back, or whatever it is, or even just call up my friends, like I said in the book, one of my friends was like, no, Karen, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. I'm like, all right, just 7 to go. More to go.
Well, let's talk about success. This has been probably the most interesting topic I've discussed on the book tour, because I find it tends to be a very emotional one that's tied into our ideas of who's come before us, who comes after us, our families. What does success mean to each of you right now? And is that something that has changed as you and your business have evolved? Karen, let's start with you.
So success to me right now is so much simpler than the girl who was like, thought I was going to be a lawyer in like, Dolce & Gabbana, like head to toe, with, the penthouse overlooking the river. I just left my full-time job. I was able to grow my business enough that I could take that leap. There's some fantastic things coming down the line. I got up every morning at about 5 o'clock in the morning. I worked on my business before I went to work. I worked the 9 to 5. I came home and worked on it a little bit later, into the evening as much as I could stay up. And after 2 years of doing that, I was able to finally leave and take the leap. And for me right now, success is, I get up and it's like I'm seeing things, in a whole different light. Like, I'm actually able to watch the leaves change color, and I'm able to go to the gym at 12 o'clock in the afternoon if I feel like it. And it's so simple, but it's the sweetest feeling that I've ever felt in my life. So success is, having the time to travel, to kind of be in charge of my day a little bit, to be overwhelmed if that's what it is, to have dinner with friends. It's really, really simple right now and very sweet.
What about you, Claire and Erica?
I think, what you're saying about sort of having the autonomy over your day. I think being able to, control as much as anybody can control anything, their day to day, and make decisions about how they want to live their lives. That is success for me.
That is so important to me, and it wasn't something I realized until we sold our business, and now we have a parent company, like technically, like boss and overlord. And the wonderful thing about it, and the reason it's worked, is they've given us an incredible amount of independence and autonomy. And that all of a sudden brought into very sharp focus the one most important thing to me about my job, which is that, like, feeling like I am deciding, you know, what my day looks like, and, you know, what time if I can go to the gym in the morning so I can get in a little later and all, and, you know, what projects I'm prioritizing and stuff like that. It really, I hadn't been aware of it, of how important it was to me before then. But now it really is. I think the other thing too that has changed for me in the last, and I don't think this is what defines success, but making money has become a much bigger priority for me. I think I've just gotten older, and, you know, I got married, and you start to think about your future. But I think I've also just noticed over the last 6-7 years how much personal wealth gives you the privilege of expanding personal wealth for others, and putting, and, you know, just expanding through your networks, both access and growth and privilege. And I've really noticed the ways that it tends to be sequestered to male networks. And I think the more women amass personal wealth, the more they amass power and influence. And I think that's really important. And I also just think, you know, obviously, like, money makes your life easier. And I just never used to think about it that way. And I think it tends not to be like a very feminine quality to think about, like, I really want to get rich. But I'm like really getting comfortable with that idea, and just saying that, like, yeah, I want to make a lot of money. It's important to me.
Well, there is, I mean, very clearly a double standard, even among women, about profitability, about wealth, and about how we discuss those things. Because I have watched bloggers in my community and other makers sort of go from being, you know, tiny indie companies to being huge brands, and watching people, like, cheer them on. And then there's that tipping point where you can tell, or at least it seems like from the outside, they are now financially successful. And then people start to turn and be like, oh, well, who does she think she is? Like,
right.
She has a nanny now, and she has.
She's not authentic anymore.
Exactly.
You're like, no, she's authentic to who she, like, this is the path of her life
Exactly.
and her career. Yeah.
And I don't think it's to say that financial,
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't think the financial success is the only measure of success, but I think it is one that often comes with a lot of guilt and a lot of pressure from within the community of female makers and entrepreneurs, and it's one that I think should be discussed a little bit more.
Well, even just the thing you said, right, like, about having a nanny. I mean, I want kids, but I'm really intimidated by the idea because I really love working, right? But if I work and I make enough money where I can have support and somebody helping me raise my kids, I can do both. And, like, that to me is one of the reasons to make sure that I'm amassing personal wealth, so that I can do that and that I can do both. And yeah, I think that, you know, I led with that idea of, like, I think it's important so that women can spread it to other networks, because there just aren't enough women investors and things like that. And I do think that is important, but I also don't think women should apologize for wanting to have money just for the sake of making life easier.
No, not at all. I'd love to know from each of you, what is one thing you wish you had known before becoming an entrepreneur? I'll start with mine, which is I wish, and I constantly think about this, I wish I had known, or I wish someone had told me, you will never stop making mistakes. There's not a single person 40, 50 years into their company that is not still currently making mistakes. But I think the silver lining of the fact that these mistakes and hurdles never stop is that they become infinitely more fulfilling to solve and learn from. And I think when you're in your 20s and starting a business, it's just, oh my God, can I get through it? Can I make payroll this week? Like, can we pay our taxes on time? And now that I'm in my 30s and inching closer to 40, I feel like I am looking for these lessons in a way that just makes the hurdles a little bit less terrifying, that I think I thought if I worked hard enough, they would disappear altogether. It's kind of like that thing where I think high schoolers, like, which I'm guessing a lot of you in this room probably were those high schoolers where you felt like if you just, like, took all the AP classes and just got straight A's, like, life would be a piece of cake. That doesn't happen.
Doesn't stop.
That does not happen. It just gets harder and more complicated. So I wish someone had, like, drilled that in a little earlier.
That's such a good reminder, because I think I still think that. I'm just going to get so good one day that I'll just, like, be able to make all the right decisions, and this will be a breeze.
Well, I think the problem with that, and I had the same realization, is that assumes everything else stays the same. Like, as if we're all working and operating in a vacuum, and that, like, markets don't change, the internet doesn't change, people's assumptions and desires for products and things change, and there's just so much that's out of our control.
And that you don't change.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, I mean, for those of us, I mean, I was 23 when I started my business, and I'm 35 now, and those are drastically different places in life.
Yeah, I wish that I kind of always was fixated on the end of the road. I wish that someone had told me that I was going to spend a lot of time on the damn road. So it's like it's a long, long, long journey. And, you know, I think the end changes for each of us as we grow and different things sort of take, you know, become more important. So yeah, similar to what you're saying, like kind of as you go along and you make mistakes, it's like, I feel like I'm, on the road and I get to this signpost and it's like, you got it, you did it, yeah, and then it's like, all right, you get to the next one and it's a whole other set of lessons to learn, especially for me. I think the greatest thing is in scaling a business and figuring out how in the world to do that. Every time I make it to one milestone, I'm kind of like, all right, I've got everything in my pocket now. I'm just going to go and apply that to the next one. No, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
I think for me, hearing that you're only going to spend 20% of your time doing things that are your core competencies. I came from working in magazines and I was an editor, and I spent the bulk of my time working in magazines as an editor, editing. And I worked on other little things here and there, but my core job was editing, and that's what I did every single day. And even when I was producing all of the content for the site or editing all of the content for Of a Kind, I still was only spending really 20% of my time on that. Because there's just so many other things you have to do, and we've had to get good at managing lawyers and accountants, and thinking about Facebook marketing strategies and creating newsletter templates and all of these things, managing web developers that, of course, are part of the business, but that we are still very, very involved in.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we open it up to everybody for questions, I want to ask you a quick lightning round of short, not to be overthought questions. So let's start with one that you've all already answered before that should be easy. What is a tool, object, or ritual that you could not live without in your workday? Let's start with you.
I run every morning. I can't. I'm crazy without it.
I'm a serious to-do list maker.
Karen?
I drink like 12 cups of tea all day.
If you weren't doing the job that you're doing right now, what other job would you like to try? Karen, let's start with you.
So I have a degree in psychology, and seeing how even that has been affected by technology, I would go back and figure out how I could make mental wellness available to more people for less money.
That's great.
I would do something around content for teenagers.
I don't know. I think I would probably create things with my hands.
Oh, you'd be a maker.
Yeah.
And you could sell your own things.
Yeah.
You'd be very good at it. What's one piece of advice you would give to a young woman who is hoping to start her business right now? Just something really basic and simple.
Tell people.
That you want to start a business?
Yeah, tell people. Make yourself accountable to someone. Say, I want to do this thing. And I think the more people you tell, they're like, oh, I have a friend who actually builds websites. You should talk to him, or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to be selfish and speak to my own inner 15-year-old right now, and that is get help. Reach out to anyone. Doesn't matter how big you think they are or who might not respond to your email. Just try.
Know that you're not going to be able to do everything, and that's okay. And you will find people who can help you to do the things you don't know how to do.
This is a two-parter. What is the hardest part of your job? But what is also your favorite part of your job? Sometimes they're the same thing.
Yeah. I would say managing other people is probably the hardest part of my job, and it's definitely sometimes the most rewarding. Ultimately, the most rewarding thing for me is always working on coming up with an idea and seeing that thing become a physical product is really rewarding.
Yeah, those are mine too. Managing people, I think, is something that we are still really struggling with, and our team has always been really small. And it means that there's not a lot of time for us to be both, producing things on a day-to-day basis and managing. And I really want to get better at it.
I think it's also hard because Eric and I work really closely. We know each other so well, have such high expectations of ourselves and others, and just have very similar instincts. Sometimes, it's a mind meld thing, and so
it's very easy to get frustrated when people don't have those same instincts,
right,
which is totally unreasonable.
And that's what I don't know on a day-to-day basis. I'm you wouldn't screw up like that, but maybe that's just because you I don't know what the expectations of other people would be. I don't know how upset to get, or yeah, we're working on it.
For me, it's being the final answer. I feel like Jeopardy all the time. It's the final answer is, and I'm like, shit, that's me. Okay, I'll be right with you. And then I love getting to know my customers. Yeah, it's really fun to talk to other women.
Yeah. All right, last but not least, what is your favorite thing to come home to after a very long day at work?
like a sitcom and my husband's kale salad. Just like, yeah, maybe a glass of wine.
My bunny, I have a bunny. Yeah, it's hard to get really upset when there's a bunny. Yeah.
I'm going to win at Christmas and birthdays and everything for this one, but that guy right there.
Good answer. Before I open it up to questions for anybody who has them in the audience, I just want to thank Postman Books for being here. They have the book in the back if anybody wants a copy. And thank you to Google for having us. So, and thank you to these amazing women. So, thanks. Does anybody have any questions for the panel or for any of us? Oh, yeah, go for it.
Hi, thanks again for coming. I had a question about learning and just growing as you go. So one of the common threads in a lot of the questions was how you learn from your own experiences, or previous ones, and from experiences of other people that you talk to. But what's your opinion on how to just grow either as a leader or get better at managing people? Would you suggest maybe business school or books, or, what are your thoughts on that?
I think everybody has different paths to that. I'm somebody who never went to business school, probably should have, but I read a lot of business books, but I think that being a leader is a muscle memory. I think it's something that you have to do a lot of different times to kind of feel comfortable thinking of yourself that way. I started my business as like a sole proprietor and now have to oversee people, and that's still very uncomfortable for me, but the more times I do it, the more it becomes a muscle I feel more comfortable flexing and getting used to. And I think one of the things I find most helpful is to maybe make a list of the ways in which you are already leading in your life, whether that's like leading a team meeting or you're in charge of like a volunteer project outside of work. Reminding yourself of the moments where you're already a leader and doing a good job of it helps you feel more confident.
I think learning to ask for help, but also, or ask for feedback and help, but vetting that yourself and knowing what fits for you. I remember the first time we had to let an employee go, we called 2 of our advisors to ask them for help who had more experience and who had done this in the past. And one of them was like, well, just tell her that you are getting rid of the role. And we're like, well, we're not. But he's like, yeah, just tell her that, and then you'll hire someone later and it'll be fine and it'll just be a lot easier. And that just didn't ring true to us. And then we called another advisor and she was like, helped us write a whole script that was like, I'm sure you know that this is coming. We've had these conversations, and just gave us sort of the strength to be like, you can do this. And that felt right to us. So I think, just vetting advice too.
So I don't manage that many people now, but in my previous job, I managed about like 25 people or so. And the one thing that I learned, especially within the corporate setting, I learned that a lot of people were sort of pretending to be managers based on what they thought the role called for or what it meant to be a manager. And I ended up having the best conversations and the best relationships with the people that I managed when I kind of just sat down and let them speak to me, and just kind of got to the heart of what was going on with them and allowed them to be human and have room to grow. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi. So over here. So 2 of the topics that you all talked about were growth of your business, but also autonomy and control over your day. And I'm wondering how to bring those 2 things together. Can you do both at once? Is it a one after the other situation? I'm just wondering on your thoughts on that.
I do think, I remember when we were in, I guess, like year 2 or something of the business, and I just started dating my husband, and I was like, I'm really sorry I can't be in a relationship because I stay up until like 1:30 in the morning every night with my computer on my lap, and being like, there's no way I can do this. And now that to me is like a marker, because I look back on that and I'm like, I go to bed at like 11 every night at the latest. And I do think it gets easier over time. And I think with most businesses, you probably have to put a lot more in the first like 2 to 3 years than you do in the years that follow. But I also think maybe, I don't know if I gave a false impression of what autonomy means. I still don't really feel like I have control over my day. Like I still work all of the time and I work harder than I think most of my friends do, but it's knowing that it's my choice to do that and like when to do it exactly that's really important.
And you can say yes or no to the meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an important, I think autonomy is something that sometimes gets conflated with like the idea of like everyone is okay with the choices you make. And I think that that's one of the hardest things, and I think I talk about this with my wife Julia all the time, is that like we're both freelancers. We both essentially kind of can control everything we do in our life, but no one talks to you about what it feels like to control other people's, not control, but to absorb other people's reactions to those choices. Because most of us have the autonomy to say, like, nope, I'm not going to be on that call, or not going to be at that meeting, which is fine, and the world will go on, and your business will go on, but someone might be mad.
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like women in particular have a
Yes.
difficult time with people being disappointed or upset, and that's where I think a support system or like just friends to go get coffee with comes in handy, where you could be like, I felt so bad that I didn't go to that, but I also felt really good that I stayed home and didn't go to that thing. So it's like managing those feelings.
I think that having a partnership has made that so much easier, of just somebody else being like, no, it's okay that you didn't, or like, we're not
Yeah.
going to do this and it's going to be fine. And that has been such a huge, one of the many values of having a partner.
Yeah. I think a part of it is also managing your own expectations of yourself and whatever sort of guilt trips that you might put yourself through as well. So, there have been times when I'm like, okay, I really need to make this yoga class at 6 o'clock for my own health, like my own benefit. So I'll get up really early tomorrow, So it's about balancing your expectations of yourself too.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, so I have two questions. One of which is, for context purposes, if you could all let us know the size of your business currently. And the second one is, for someone who is sort of starting out with an idea for a business, how would you recommend going about figuring out who to partner with or who to bring on your team and how to find those people?
I'll start with my side. I have 3 full-time employees, me being one of them, and I have about a team of 10 to 12 writers who kind of come in and out of my blog life. And then this book was made by 3 people, basically, so small.
And we're 6 full-time, and then also have various
Interns, freelancers.
Yeah.
I am a team of 1, and I actually have some contract people who work with me. I have a COO and a marketing person, and but I just kind of fill people in around me like that for now. What was the second part of your question? Will you remind me?
The second question is, how do you determine at the beginning stages who to partner with, if you should bring someone on to partner with you, and how you find those people?
I'm gonna let you guys
My gut response to that would be to be very, very cautious of taking on a partner if you don't absolutely need one, because companies can grow really quickly and then someone else has a lot of control over your company. So like, I wish I had kept my company like really, really small, and I got legal advice to like incorporate it and make it safer. And on the one hand, that's good, but it also means like a thing that feels like my baby is shared by other people, and that's a weird feeling. So I would be really cautious and get a super, super well vetted contract, because I think sometimes the best friends can go into business and then, expectations or ideas of where a brand should go change. So I always feel like write the contract with the worst possible outcome in mind, so that if that does happen, there is a rubric to follow, because that happens a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I can't imagine doing this without a partner, but I also think we have a really specific relationship and really specific partnership, and we had known each other for years beforehand. We had worked in like very small capacities with each other, but in a way that I think shed light on what our working tactics were, and helped us sort of vet, could we do this together? But then, logistically, when we started the company, neither of our equity vested. It was on a 4-year vesting schedule. We, were in this place with a 1-year cliff, meaning that neither of us had equity until after the first year, so that it does give you that chance to say, is this actually going to work for us?
I found the people that I work with through community, and I think if you don't have someone in mind, or you kind of haven't already started building that relationship, that's also really good to be able to turn to other people who can vet them for you in a sense.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. My question is, a lot of times I hear women say, like, oh, I had no idea the company was going to get this big, or we're going to be this successful. Do you feel it's important to go in with this like success vision, or kind of just see how much your hard work can yield?
I mean, for us, I think what has worked best is thinking like a year ahead. We still struggle to think 3 years ahead. And I think that's just the nature of who we are as entrepreneurs, and like what sort of work we find satisfying. And I think there are other people who it's really important to them to look and say, like, in 5 years, this is going to be a $3 million company. In 10 years, it's going to be a $2 billion company. I think you just have to know who you are and know what drives you. It's really hard for me to think that long term and be motivated by that. But I can be motivated by what I think is going to happen like 9 months from now.
Okay. For me, where I am right now, I think so much of what I'm trying to figure out about, my success and like how I should sort of even define that for my company, is there's a lot sort of coming at me based on the market. Dollar Shave Club just sold for like $1 billion, and so right now, in all honesty, I'm kind of a little bit in the place of the question that you've asked, and trying to figure out what's right for me. What can I do as a business, and do I set a cap or not? So. I'm just going to be honest. The question, it always goes around.
Yeah. I also think that people who say that they didn't realize it was going to be that big, I don't think you accidentally build like $1 billion business. So I don't know if people, and I think some people are just humble and they want to self-present in a certain way, and maybe, the market changed and they didn't realize that the opening was as big as it was, but I just don't know if you can accidentally build something massive.
Yeah, I think also consider or give yourself room in your company, whether it's a tiny company or a company with huge aspirations, is give yourself room for those definitions to change. Like, I started my business with absolutely nothing in mind other than hoping I could use that business to get a job at a magazine. And I thought of it as like a step up to something different. And then the market changed and magazines became unstable and web became more stable. And so my definition of what the business should be should change. And then there are some years where I'm like, my goal is to just stay afloat. And then there's some years where I have like really big plans, but like things wax and wane, and that's okay. I think a lot of times business is this like linear thing, and it's totally not. It's like full of all sorts of curves and turns.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm interested in the concept of the entrepreneurial spirit, because I think there's like an idea or myth that there's like the born entrepreneur. And obviously here within Google, we work in sort of kind of a hybrid environment where we are within a huge multinational corporation, but we also have a lot of freedom to kind of pursue things that interest us and business opportunities that are available. And so I'm interested in what kind of changed for you where you said, okay, I'm not going to work within the structure of an existing business and sort of change it from within. I'm going to go out on my own. So like you kind of touched on the fact that it was maybe market forces that made you decide it wasn't the step up, it was actually, that was where you wanted to pursue your career. So I'd be interested in hearing your experiences.
My experience has been that I think at my core as a human being, I've always known I couldn't work for somebody else and be I'm not a very good team player. I'm just not. I'm good at like creating teams and being like, you go do stuff. I'm not good at participating in that. And I'm an only child. You could blame that. I don't know. I just feel like I've always known I couldn't do that. And my first few jobs out of college were like very much team jobs. And for me, it was a moment of like, the biggest thing I'm taking away from this is that I would never want to work for somebody else unless it was somebody that I just absolutely thought like was the best of whatever they did. And I would never question anything they did, which I don't think exists. So I'm just happier doing things on my own.
I think for me, it's this idea of like realizing your own vision and like an idea that you've come up with that's really just rewarding to me in a way that other projects aren't. There's like something really special, I think, about that of like, I can just think of so many conversations that like Eric and I have had in the back of a cab or something that like 6 months later are a real thing. And there's something so magical about that to me that I think is harder to do when you're working for someone else.
I would never say that I was a born entrepreneur, and I don't think I had any aspirations until we came up with the idea for Of a Kind to start a business. But I will say that I really love that sense of ownership that Claire articulated and always have, and that's something that's always been fulfilling for me. And beyond that, I also trust that I am smart enough to learn things I don't know. And I think that that's been the other half that has been able to push me forward and get me excited about things. To be like, totally, I'm just going to dive into this and figure it out.
For me, it's more about problem solving, and I think that's where you actually find this entrepreneurial spirit, that you speak of. It's to kind of say, hey, this is missing, or this is being done really badly, or this is not really capitalizing on a great market, like whatever those things are. It's about seeing what's missing and this sort of desire to figure out how to fill that void, the white space. That for me is where that spirit is. And I think you can do it anywhere. When I was at my full-time job recently, I kind of always said, if I had the opportunity to think more the way that I really am in this position, I would probably have stayed longer.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi. My question is kind of along those same lines. I'm kind of interested in day one. Was your idea so clear and so right in your mind that you're like, okay, yes, this is what I have to do, like, let's do it? Or were there a couple of ideas and you picked the one that was most interesting? Or like, how did you go from idea to start?
Yeah, so Claire was applying for a job for us. Claire was applying for a job at 20 by 200, and she emailed me her cover letter, and we were going back and forth. I was sort of helping her edit her cover letter. She was like obsessed with 20 by 200 at this point. She was like, "I'll do anything there," and in going back and forth and editing it, we were talking about what was so interesting about the business model and what was so compelling about it and why it was needed in the world. And I got off the train that night going home, and there was an email in my inbox that said, "Read this instead of my cover letter." And it was like, what if we did this for fashion? This doesn't exist, but it seems like, that's what our friends are consuming. That's what we get really excited about. And we fleshed this out over the course of like 28 emails or something that night.
That night, yeah. I just got chills thinking about it again. Like, but not everybody's like that. But like we did. It was that idea. It was like lightning.
But that idea, I think, is very much the thing that sits at the core of a Kind is this idea of limited edition pieces with a story. But the thing that has spun out of that, and I think the world we've been able to build around it, was definitely not in those emails. And I think a lot of that has just come from what's been interesting to us, the feedback we've gotten, random things that we've tried that have stuck, things that we've tried that have failed, and the business has been shaped by all of that.
For me, it honestly started with a need. The story is, so I called my girlfriends up, to get like a pedicure and so on, and I grabbed my pink razor and I scraped across my legs like I usually do, and went out and I, put my feet up on the basin and I rolled my jeans up, and like the entire inside of my leg was covered with razor burn. And we just started like batting back and forth about how freaking annoying shaving was and so on. And so I think there were like a few things that just kind of were percolating. I had seen, Harry's and Dollar Shave Club at that point, and I was like, these they're still not doing anything for women. I'm so annoyed. I don't want to use your Dr. Carver butter or whatever the hell it's called. And then it was just sort of, it just stuck with me. I knew it was really strong. It was different from anything that I had ever done before. I'd had a lot of experience at that point, and I knew that it was scalable. And that was one thing that I wanted to be able to do. I wanted to challenge myself to see what it would be like to build a scalable business and to challenge the Gillettes and so on of the world. And then I grabbed my balls in my hand and I'm just kidding. But yeah, it took a lot of gumption. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and being a part of this. Thanks to Google for having us, and thanks to Postman for being here to sell books. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.